Of breaking news, we have just been informed that a patient at the Oregon Psychiatric Hospital has escaped and has decided to tell the story to the people in our news broadcast. We have him here today as a guest to get an in-depth story on what really happened inside the hospital.
Keep in mind that this is airing on all stations and will be shown again at a later date. All breaking news segments are brought to you by McDonald's. With that being said, please listen closely to our special guest who for his own safety cannot reveal his identity at this current time.
Story of what had happened inside the hospital. The truth has always been untold.
It's not my pleasure, but my duty. The people need to know what really happens inside that place. Many people may have the wrong idea here on what had happened. Too many, I may be seen as a psychomental case, but really I'm just an innocent person trying to make my way through life, unnoticed preferably.
Why don't you start off by telling us a bit about yourself?
Well, I was a longtime patient at the Oregon Psychiatric Hospital, which is run by a big nurse, or a nurse with the name of Ratchet, or as we like to call her, the big nurse. My father was a Colombian tribal leader. Once my father had passed away, I inherited the right to be a tribal leader, and shortly after I was deemed mentally unstable because of the effects of my father's drinking and my mother's negativity. I was brought into the ward, which is how I got the nickname of Chief.
What would you say one of your weaknesses are?
Well, I would have to say that the fact I occasionally suffer from hallucinations and delusions would be my biggest weakness. I had always tried to keep myself so I could go along being unnoticed, but that's a little hard seeing as I'm 6'5".
What about your advantages that had helped you escape the hospital?
Probably that everybody thought I was mute and deaf. This came as an advantage to me because my duty at the ward was to always sweep, which is how I got my other nickname, Chief Broom. Anyways, I was the only one that the aides had trusted to clean the staff room because they had thought that he couldn't tell anyone what was being planned because they were under the impression that he was deaf.
Could you explain Miss Ratchet to us?
The big nurse. I hated that crazy bitch.
Pardon?
Sorry, it's just what she has been known to do to us. Miss Ratchet had been a former army nurse, and then she became the head nurse of the ward. She basically ran the whole thing. She who influenced everyone, even the staff of the ward, into doing her bidding. She was in full control over every aspect possible of the ward. She has a strong ability to present this false emotions without being aware of the oppression. Eventually, she had been broken down and became weak, and some assumed she is able to act like the angel of mercy, while at the same time shaming the patients into submission. She always knows their weak spots and exactly where to peck. At all the group meetings, everyone had always tried to get on her good side and please her by sharing their darkest and dirtiest secrets. She had also gotten us patients to attack each other in our most vulnerable places. No matter what, if a patient had rebelled against her, he would be sent and receive electroshock treatment. I think that she maintains the power in her hands simply by a strategic use of shame, guilt, and a determination to divide and conquer her patients.
What is this you say about her being broken down? How could a woman that was a former army nurse who ran a psychiatric hospital be brought down?
It wasn't until McMurphy had come to the ward where things had started to change for the better, or in his case, the worst.
McMurphy? Who's that? And what do you mean by, in his case, for the worst?
His name is Randall McMurphy. He had come to the ward as a transfer from Pendleton Work Farm, and when he had arrived, he claimed to be a gambling man with a zest for women and cards. He was big, like huge, massive, even maybe shorter than me, but built like a tank. He was also very loud, sexual, and confident at all once, never doubting his abilities. He had always spoken louder than the rest and didn't give a damn about what others thought of his language. He spoke what was on his mind and even stood against Ratchet and her manipulated staff. After his first group meeting, he told me and the other patients that Nurse Ratchet was a ball cutter. We had tried to explain to him that there is no defying the big nurse, but there was only because we had been under her control for so long that we forgot what freedom felt like. To us, she was the one who decided our fates. Whether or not we cleaned, got shot, or ate breakfast, in some cases even lived, it was when that he had made a bet with the rest of us that he could make her lose her temper within a week. This surprised and scared us because everybody did what Nurse Ratched says, and everybody had the same general emotions except for McMurphy. He consistently tried to manipulate the system of the ward for his own needs and advantages. He managed to get under Ratched's skin by playing her at her own game. He had picked up on her weak spots almost instantly. He had then used that knowledge to his advantage to push her over the edge. Eventually, it got to the point where Mrs. Ratched sent him and myself to receive electroshock treatments after we helped defend another patient who was being beat by an aide. The treatment had no effect on him. Instead, it made him even more rowdy and outgoing and ready to beat the system.
What kind of conflicts arose ever since McMurphy had arrived?
Honestly, I don't think I would be able to recount everything that he did to get at Nurse Ratched. I can't. Simply, I can't.
Well, then could you give us the main ones that come to mind? Shouldn't be too hard, seeing as how it sounds as if they had a couple of huge altercations.
Okay, well, I'll try my best. The first thing that he would always be louder than everybody on the ward put together, which surprised everyone and caught them off guard for a while. Then after his first group meeting, he started to rally the acutes around him, and I followed him as well, but I silently so as to not attract attention to myself. Once he had gained some momentum, he was able to get the acutes to pass a vote to have a second day room just for them. The next was a vote to watch the World Series. Even though it was passed, Nurse Ratched tried to overrule it, and in retaliation, every day at the game, he would drop whatever he was doing and sit in front of the blank TV screen. And only one by one, all of the acutes would join him. They would sit there silent as a grave until the game has been over, and then they got back to whatever they were doing before the game started. Then he organized the right to start a basketball team in the ward, which set the nurse right off bad. Reasons was a couple of weeks before. McMurphy realized that he was a nurse at Ratched's mercy, so he stopped all his attempts at freedom. He then just couldn't bear to think that the suicide of Cheswick was his fault for not standing up for him. So he showed the whole ward that he was still in control. From the back of the meeting room, he walked up to the front past the staff, to the glass of the nurse's station, saw his cigarettes, which were being rationed from him, and punched straight through the glass, grabbed a pack, took one cigarette, just one, and put it back as if it were never taken. The day that the glass was fixed, he did it again, saying that he couldn't wait any longer, saying that it was a craving that couldn't be controlled. Now back to the basketball team. About 1 week into practice, the ball went flying into the glass once again and smashed the whole thing, popping a hole in the ball. That was the end of the basketball and the start of his next idea. To give a sense of the outside world, he offered that he and another 9 patients, along with the appropriate staff, would go on a fishing trip to one of his favorite fishing spots. This was approved by the doctor of the ward, saying that it does present appropriate therapeutic value and should begin as soon as possible. The last one that I can think of is the time that McMurphy tore open Nurse Ratched's uniform, which showed her extremely large tits, which have caused a sense of wonder among us patients. In retaliation, she sent McMurphy to be lobotomized, turning him into a vegetable that would make him easy to control.
Whoa, you mean to say that aside from the psychiatric warfare that they had going against each other, it got physical at one point?
That's what I said.
You have brought up quite a bit of conflict between Nurse Ratched and McMurphy. What is this conflict really about?
Exactly what it sounds like. Like I previously said, it all began with the nurse, Ratched, running everything in her twisted ways. We all had said and done what had been asked of us, and it didn't dare to speak out against her. And it would have resulted in electroshock treatment. Once McMurphy had arrived from the work farm, he had started disrupting the flow of the ward and began making bets that he could crack the big nurse within a week. Eventually his actions have stimulated the rest of us to take actions to aid him, but because we gained our sense of freedom back, throughout all these rebellious actions, McMurphy had gradually became leader of all the patients. He began to stop standing up for the rest of us once he realized that he is down at Nurse Ratched's mercy. We all began to get confused. A fellow patient, Cheswick, drowned himself after he was left out to dry when he made a stand against the big nurse, and McMurphy chose not to help him. Cheswick was also very fond of McMurphy's struggle against Nurse Ratched. I knew he was the only one who was most upset over the situation. They had even said that the drowning was even a possible suicide after Cheswick's death. McMurphy had felt that he had the responsibility of rehabilitating us patients. I think the weight of his obligation to the other patients and his fears for his own life begins to wear down his confidence and strength. This had then given McMurphy the idea to plan a fishing trip for a total of 10 of us patients altogether. The point of this was for us to get a feel for the outside world and feel powerful and masculine again, as we caught our large fish on our own. Once McMurphy had gotten back to the ward, he once again had his rebellious actions that were ignited by defending George Sorensen and getting into a fight with the aides. I had also joined in this fight. As a result, we were both sent to the disturbed ward to receive electroshock treatment. When the aides had discovered the party McMurphy had set up the previous night with a lot of drinking and smoking of marijuana, and also Billy Candy, whom is a prostitute to have sex. It set off quite a few violent events. First, Billy had committed suicide by cutting his own throat because Nurse Ratched had found him with Candy and threatened to tell his mother. Second, McMurphy had attacked Ratched by ripping open her dress and attempting to strangle her. This had resulted in McMurphy getting a lobotomy and returning as a vegetable. This had also resulted in Nurse Ratched losing her dominating power over the ward because she lost her voice. The remaining patients realized that the big nurse was not helping them anymore now that she couldn't speak. So they had either checked themselves out of the hospital or switched to other hospitals. After all this, I had then made a very courageous decision. I decided to suffocate McMurphy in his bed, enabling him to die with some dignity rather than live as a symbol of Ratched's former power.
Former power? What do you mean by that? Is she getting fired? Quitting? Retiring?
No, she is staying, I think. But last I remember, all the patients in the ward, for some personal reasons, were all checking out to get away, taking their first choices as people instead of patients, I'd like to think. You see, the ward was split into two sections, the acutes who were deemed curable and the chronics who were deemed incurable, because of the physical reasons like restricted movement or dementia and all the other mental problems. I was a chronic only because I acted like I was sick beyond repair, only because I didn't want to take part in the group meetings that the acutes did.
Correct me if I'm mistaken. You have been in the ward for a long time, faking being insane. Did you ever choose to act as you are now, perfectly normal, and get cleared to re-enter society?
Fear.
Fear of what?
Fear of what I used to know and how it has all changed and how people would think of it formerly insane person trying to get along in life. I feared I would be shut out of society, at least in the hospital. I got 3 meals a day and a place to sleep, and all I had to do was return clean every day and do nothing wrong.
Thank you for your time and sharing your story with us. Unfortunately, we had run out of time, so we'll be finishing this on a later date.
The police have heard your story, and one of the officers has offered to have you stay in her home until you can get back on your feet in the city. Looks like you won't be shut out of society like you thought. That's it for tonight.